What a bummer. Tackett Curtis picks USC. We break down what it means, how disappointed we should be, and why maybe this is Paul Chryst reaping a little bit of what he sows. All that and more on today's Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Ryan Herrings, your host of Locked On Badgers. Thank you, as always, for making this one of your first listens. We're going to do a bit of an emergency pod today, release a second show, because this is big news, and we're here to chop it up. Tackett Curtis picking USC. We're going to break it down today. But first, I also want to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Well, let's jump into it, right? Like this has been the big Christmas present under the tree for Wisconsin football recruiting, really this entire cycle. Tackett Curtis, the almost 5-star outside linebacker out of Manny, Louisiana. Big time prospect, total blue chipper, offers from everywhere. Had it broken down to Ohio State, USC, Wisconsin. He picked USC, and this happened pretty quickly. We had been expecting Tackett to make a decision at the end of July, and it seems like it just finally clicked for him that USC is the place for him to go. This one's tough. This one really stings. And listen, from Tackett's perspective, there's no wrong choices, right? You go to USC, play in California, probably get a lot of NIL money. That's a premier program, obviously. They're coming to the Big Ten. I kind of wonder if that little bit of added juice played into this. Or you go to Ohio State, one of the obviously another premier programs, playing the Big Ten, playing Columbus. Or you come to Wisconsin and, one of the best outside linebacker pedigrees in the country, play for a great defense. So there's no bad choices from Tackett's perspective. It's just really frustrating from when you look at this class. He was really the last whale that Wisconsin had any type of in on. There's no other 4 or 5-star players that right now that we know of that Wisconsin has any type of shot with. So yeah, he was really the one player that could maybe elevate this class a little bit. This is already a disappointing class. We're going to get into that more coming up, but Tackett was really the one player where Wisconsin was in on. It felt like they had a legitimate chance for. I think they did have a legitimate chance. I don't think that was all just smoke. I think that was really there. But I think a lot of Wisconsin fans and a lot of analysts really thought Wisconsin, because of the relationship, because of how long Bobby April had been recruiting, and would come out on top here. It's really disappointing. Yeah, this is recruiting, and I'm recording this right after the news broke. So this is just kind of a therapy session. This is frustrating. It's tough recruiting at Wisconsin when you try to make that next leap, that next jump. And you're going up against schools like Ohio State and USC that are flashier, they're sexier, and quite frankly, they have much more mature NIL programs. Tackett Curtis talked about it. He went to USC, and they had a whole presentation. It sounds like they did a better job of selling what he could do and his brand during the official visit. And Wisconsin just didn't overcome that, didn't present it in the same way, whatever it is. It stinks. It stinks to put this much effort into something. I mean, without question, Wisconsin recruited him harder and longer than Ohio State or USC. Bobby April was down there from the jump all the time. And to put that much effort into somebody who, quite frankly, would be a great fit for this Wisconsin defense, and to see it fall through, really, because once again, Wisconsin's not the sexiest, tool in the toolkit. USC is just a little shinier. And quite frankly, again, I think their NIL program and the NIL money, I'm not casting any aspersions. Like I don't know Tackett Curtis. I've talked to his coach. I've been told that NIL money wouldn't be the biggest issue here, but I think it probably plays an issue. It plays a role, and it should. And I would never begrudge a kid or a player, a high school player, or their family from factoring that in, right? If I was 18 and I was offered, and again, this is all speculative. This is just me having a therapy session here, processing Wisconsin losing the only blue chip prospect it looked like we had a chance on in this cycle. And I think NIL probably played a bit of a role in it. I think USC, Ohio State, really probably every big-time college football program is ahead of Wisconsin on that. We just had the varsity collective formed at Wisconsin to help with NIL, but we haven't heard or seen anything really with it. It feels like Wisconsin is still just a tick slow on this stuff, and it probably hurt them a little bit in this recruitment. Now, I don't know. Maybe Wisconsin has a big NIL deal and they lose Tackett Curtis anyway. That's totally possible, right? We should never be crushed by losing a recruit to USC or Ohio State. That's kind of the pecking order of college football anyway. Much like Illinois should never be distraught about losing recruits to us. We're above Illinois in the food chain. And USC, Ohio State, unfortunately, are above Wisconsin in the food chain of college football recruiting. We're pretty high in that food chain, but we're not the apex predator, right? We're seeing that in play right now. But still, it felt like Tackett was the guy that Wisconsin could land in this class that would really be one player we could point to. One player Wisconsin could point to and say, we got a lot better with this one guy in this class. He's a difference maker. And I don't know if there's really any difference makers in this class right now. I'm a little salty, by the way. Again, that's what happens when we record right after the news. I do want to talk about, I said, what's the impact on Wisconsin? Outside linebacker is the deepest spot on the team, right? So if we're just talking from a pure X's and O's standpoint, depth chart standpoint, Wisconsin's fine at outside linebacker. And that's not me trying to cope. That's not me trying to say, it's fine if we didn't get Tackett Curtis, because it's not fine. You put a ton of resources into that. You had to win this battle. This was your one chance for the big-time blue-chip prospect. USC is going to get 17 other 4 or 5 high 3-star players, right? Tackett Curtis is just a big fish in a giant net for them. Wisconsin, Tackett Curtis was the big fish in a small pond, right? Ohio State's going to put together a class of 20 4- and 5-star guys, right? So from that perspective, it felt like Wisconsin needed to find a way to really land Tack, but they didn't. What's the impact from a depth chart X and O standpoint? Like I said, Wisconsin's loaded at outside linebacker. TJ Bowlers, Daryl Peterson, Witt is a guy, Caden Johnson. You're bringing in Mayer in this class, Jordan Mayer, who we really like a lot. Wisconsin's loaded there. They really are, and they're going to be really good at that spot. But Tackett Curtis was a different dude. Like, he would have given Wisconsin a different type of player, the type of player who could have lined up in space against Ohio State and given the Buckeyes problems. So, yeah, it's a bummer. Wisconsin will be fine at outside linebacker. This recruiting class, it hurts. We're going to get into a little bit more with the recruiting class and talk a little bit about maybe some of this recruiting class, Tackett Curtis, it might be a little bit of reap what you sow with Paul Chryst. We're going to talk about that next. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As the sun comes out, small businesses continue to grow, and LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview. It helps you find those people faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn to find jobs consistently throughout my career. It's an incredible professional resource for me. And if you're trying to find a person, you can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to help reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network. Add your job. Then people at LinkedIn will help search through an enormous candidate pool and find the right people for you. And there's a really, really interesting tools and filters that allow you to get rid of candidates that aren't a good fit, right? So you're not going to have to interview a bunch of flotsam, a bunch of people who just shouldn't be in the door. It's win-win. It's win for the candidates. It's win for the hirers. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn the number one job delivery, our job site in the market. Nothing does a better job delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I want to thank everyone again for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every day, trying to always get you guys my thoughts and my perspectives on the latest Badger news, what's going on, great guests, and we're really building the community. Really appreciate it, even though this isn't the most enjoyable show. Let's talk a little bit about reaping what you sow, right? Let's talk a little bit about this class right now, which isn't very good, And is this kind of what Paul Chryst and the Badgers deserve, in a sense? So if we go back to when Saeed Khalif left, it took Paul Chryst about 8 months to refill that recruiting department. About 8 months in an era when teams are hiring general managers to manage their college football roster, when the transfer portal's happening, when Saeed Khalif in Michigan State is building out a big recruiting department, in an era when recruiting is more time intensive than ever. The head coach at Wisconsin took 8 months to fill out their recruiting department. And again, I've had lots of takes on Paul Chryst, right? We've talked a lot, good, bad. We just got to call it like it is. That was a failure. That was an absolute failure. And I don't know if having a recruiting department in place the entire time helps you close off Tackett Curtis. Maybe it doesn't matter at the end of the day, but you can't de-emphasize recruiting and then wonder why recruiting isn't going very well. And let newsflash, like, it's not going very well in this cycle for the Wisconsin football program. Look at the recent list of players like Lincoln Kienholz, missed to Washington. There's your quarterback. They've struck out on all their tight ends. Joe Crocker isn't committing to Wisconsin. Mikhail Gardner, not going to land him. Tackett Curtis, Khalil Tate. Yeah, there's been some good hits. Jamel Howard, Jace Arnold are two players I really like. I like Trech Kakahuna. I like the running back grouping, but I don't think the receiver group is great. They haven't found a quarterback. There's nobody on the board right now. They've struck out on their tight ends. Braden Marshall was that second corner I thought they really needed. They missed him. Khalil Tate at safety was a huge target that they lost to Iowa, and they had the first official visit with him. And now Tackett Curtis, really the guy they put all the eggs in, really the only blue chip player left on the board for them that we know of, and they lost him to USC. Yes, you have to wonder, how would this recruiting cycle, how would this 2023 cycle have played out and be playing out? Because it's not over. The book isn't written yet, right? I'm calling it like I see it right now, but the book's not written. But how would this cycle have played out if, immediately Paul Chryst, after Saeed Khalif left, made it a priority to fill out the recruiting department, to really attack it, to put somebody in place to expand it, to make it what it needs to be at Wisconsin? And that doesn't mean you need to match what Michigan State's doing, where they have, 10 people, whatever it is. But you have to make it a priority. And I said it at the time, it's going to hurt this class. This class is going to not be as good because for some reason, Paul Chryst took the recruiting department and said, we're going to punt that 8 months down the road. That is such a failure at the college level. And I'm sorry if I'm being overly critical here. Absolutely. If you disagree with me, let me know. Leave a comment, please. Like, I'm here for the Discord. I'm not right all the time. This is just my opinion, my take. I'm telling you what I feel, but you can't be a big time college football program and punt on your recruiting department for 8 months. You can't do that. I mean, that's a joke, right? That's an absolute joke. And now, you're seeing this recruiting cycle, this 2023 cycle, stuck in complete mud. Like German tanks in 1941, just they can't get through the Russian winter. Nothing's moving forward at this point. And who's on the board, right? It's one thing if you had missed Tackett Curtis, but you had, a TJ Bowlers and a Daryl Peterson, those type of guys lined up. Those guys aren't lined up. It's one thing if you missed Lincoln Kienholz, but you had 3 other quarterbacks lined up. Those guys aren't lined up. Even the positions that they've kind of closed out, receiver and running back, are there any big time difference makers? Now, I really like Jacquez Keys. I really like Nate White. I think that's a really good group. I'm not sure if there's a huge difference maker at the receiver spot. I like Jace Arnold a lot. Yeah, I don't know if that's enough there with him and Tisdale. So I think what you're seeing and what we're seeing in this cycle is a little bit of the Badgers reaping what they've sowed, a little bit of, a lack of investment in the recruiting department, and a little bit of hubris, quite frankly. I think Paul Chryst, hubris has been, and again, this is kind of a reaction show, so I'm kind of speaking as I go. But when I did the Paul Chryst issues episode, like the issues I had with Paul Chryst, one of the things I said was hubris. And it's interesting because Paul Chryst has a reputation as a very down-to-earth, humble, low-key, shucks kind of guy. And I think a lot of that's true, by the way. This is not me attempting to crush Paul Chryst on everything. I think a lot of that's true. I think Paul Chryst would be a great guy to have a beer with and have a low-key conversation. I think he also has a lot of hubris. I think that's the other side of this that doesn't get talked about. And you saw it with the coaching philosophy of, I'm going to be the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach. I'm going to call the plays, and it didn't work, right? He couldn't do all of that. And I think he's realized that. Bobby Ingram's come in. I think from a recruiting standpoint, there was a bit of a hubris there too. Saeed Khalif, it definitely looked like there was a clash personality-wise between Chryst and Saeed, where Chryst felt like maybe Saeed was trying to be a little bigger than the program, and Saeed thought Paul Chryst wasn't, promoting the recruiting side of it. Well, it's okay to have a recruiting director who's a little outspoken, right? It seems like, again, Paul kind of thought we don't need a hype man here. We're good with what we got. We don't need a recruiting department for a while. And so he shuffled people internally, and it didn't work. It didn't work, right? Look at the results on field right now. Not on field, in the recruiting department right now. Wisconsin is 13th in the Big Ten. From total composite score by 247. They're 9th if you just look by average ranking per recruit. I mean, that's not good. The only schools they're ahead of, it's like Minnesota, Illinois, Rutgers, and Maryland, I believe. Tackett Curtis, again, going back to Tack, he was a guy that really could have elevated this class to at least that middle of the pack Big Ten. And without him, that's the other part. We talked about the board is pretty bare right now. We live in an era where there's not a ton of secrets in recruiting. Recruits tweet offers, there's insiders, this stuff gets out. And I couldn't tell you right now if there's there's not another 4 or 5 star guy that I'm aware of that's on the board for Wisconsin that we have a shot with. Now, I will say, and I'm going to talk about this in some of the next segment, obviously all hope is not lost. The book on this cycle isn't written. So don't completely tune me out if you think I'm being overly harsh. I'm going to talk a little bit in the next segment about where this is headed and how this could still kind of work out in some ways. But if I'm just being real, this class has not been good. It's not been good enough for Wisconsin. And I think a lot of it traces back to that divorce between Paul Chryst and Saeed Khalif, when Chryst basically said, you're not as important as you think you are. We can do just fine without a recruiting department. Go ahead to Michigan State. We're fine on our own. And it definitely felt like a hubris move at that moment. And by the way, I think Saeed Khalif probably overstepped as well at times. Like, I'm not saying Saeed Khalif was perfect. I'm not saying he's irreplaceable. What I am saying is the best recruiting classes Wisconsin has ever had came with Saeed Khalif running the recruiting department. Okay. They came with Khalif running the recruiting department. As soon as he left, Wisconsin's recruiting classes got progressively worse. And as soon as he got to Michigan State, their recruiting classes got progressively better. Okay, that's facts. And it makes you wonder if Wisconsin and Paul Chryst specifically had recognized that maybe there's a really good guy in that role. Let's cede a little bit of power to him. I don't know. Again, I'm going on a limb. I don't know exactly what Saeed Khalif was asking for. I don't want to inject myself into that situation and say Paul Chryst was 100% wrong. I do think Paul Chryst probably took a look at it and said, we're just fine. We don't need to change that much. Go ahead and leave, and we'll be fine for 8-9 months. And quite frankly, it might be one of the bigger mistakes of his tenure when you look back at it. If they had just kept Khalif and worked with him a little bit more, given him a little more power, because again, results were being delivered. Wisconsin was recruiting better. And it just felt like a missed opportunity there. It feels even more so like it now in the wake of losing yet another recruiting battle. Frustrating, right? Now, coming up next, I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to talk about some of the reasons to be hopeful going forward. So that's on the next side, the next segment. So stick around for that. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. Really easy to use website. Great place for futures, props. We talked about Wisconsin over under 8.5. Where do you fall on that? Super interested. Let me know in the comments. I'm on the over. I think Wisconsin will get to 9 wins this year. But also futures for baseball, basketball, football. The NFL's kicking up. Great place if you have a little bit of money. Do it responsibly, obviously, but test out your futures. Take a chance on who's going to win the Super Bowl, conference championships, pennant races, NBA. Obviously the trade season is still happening. Kevin Durant's out there. That's going to impact all sorts of stuff. So it's a great website for that. Also has live Vegas games, roulette, blackjack. So you can go there. You can play some Vegas games, lay a future or two. A lot of fun. Really easy website to use. Grab your mobile device, head to the website today, and learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with me, making it one of your first listens every day through the good and the bad. And this is more of a depressing show, seeing Tackett Curtis go to our new Big Ten conference mates in 2024 in USC. So we'll see Tackett Curtis in the Big Ten for better or worse. Let me flip it a little bit and tell you why 2023 may be a bit of a one-off. So I talked about the frustration, and I've been frustrated with this for a long time. This is not a new frustration for me, with Paul Chryst seemingly abandoning the recruiting department for 8 months for, in my opinion, seemingly no good reason. I thought it was just hubris and, quite frankly, dereliction of duty. But there's also, in my opinion, a pretty good chance 2023 is kind of a one-off for a lot of reasons. This is not going to be a great recruiting class, okay, from a football standpoint. I've been saying that for a while. I did a show early on in my Locked On tenure, and I gave you several reasons why this class is probably not going to be a very good recruiting class. One of them was we didn't have a recruiting department for 8 months, building up those connections, right? Finding new prospects, finding new people to put on the board. I think that matters. Another, though, there's been a ton of coaching turnover, right? And I think it takes coaches, especially if you're plucking a guy from the NFL, a guy like Bobby Ingram. I think it's going to take them a little bit of time to develop college connections to get into the recruiting game. And quite frankly, we still don't know if he's going to be a good recruiter. So I thought because you're switching a lot of coaches around, you're bringing in new guys, bringing in a new running backs coach, switching Bob Bostead to offensive line, new inside linebacker coach who then got fired or let go, resigned, and then another new inside linebackers coach. Right. There's a lot of shifting parts there. And I thought because of that, the recruiting was going to suffer as coaches built new connections, found new players, built their boards, so that's part of it as well. And then the last reason I thought the recruiting class wouldn't be that strong. And this is nobody's fault. This is nothing you can pin on a coach. The in-state Wisconsin class just isn't very good this year. Right. Last year was that epic class where you had all the offensive linemen. You had Jared Cross, obviously Braylon Allen was originally part of that, Isaac Ham. That was a great class. And Wisconsin was able, even they didn't even do a great job in state, and they were able to pull several high-ranking kids out of the state. This year, there's no 4-star kid in the state of Wisconsin. And it just is what it is. Next year's class is supposed to be better in state, a couple 4-star players that Wisconsin's already identified. But this year, it is what it is. Wisconsin's not going to get those in-state prospects to help bump up the class. So, for several reasons, I think this year is a bit of an anomaly, right? The recruiting department wasn't filled, a bunch of coaches moving around, and the in-state program isn't very good. So coming forward to next year's in-state class is a lot better, okay? And there's a actual real live adult recruiting department in place now. So again, I was and remain incredibly frustrated by how long that took. I thought that was unnecessary, but it's there now. It is there now. And going forward, I think it's going to make a big difference. I really like Mickey Turner in that role. I think Paul Chryst, even though, again, it took him a while, I think he found a player who I think has the tools to succeed. We have to see if he does. But as a former player, former coach at Wisconsin, I think he can sell a lot of things. He's younger. He's always been considered a pretty good recruiter. I've liked a lot of the tight ends he's been able to bring in. He's won some recruiting battles at the tight end spot. So I actually think the recruiting department is in good hands going forward. And, I think we'll start to see that next year. I think we're going to start seeing those effects. So hopefully this class is a bit of a one-off. I think it could have been avoided. I think if you had continuity in the recruiting department, or if you had made a big effort to fill it, I think you'd see better results on the cycle this year. But it is what it is. And going forward, like I said, I do think the recruiting department's in good hands now. The other thing that could impact all this is we haven't really talked about it, but Wisconsin's collective, the varsity collective, the NIL group that was forming, we haven't really seen a lot from that, but I assume it's still happening. I am working on getting somebody from the collective on the show. I have a bit of a backdoor conversation with somebody there, so I'm trying to get more information to y'all on the collective. But that is something that could also kick in next year and give Wisconsin a little bit of a fighting chance in these NIL battles where USC's listen, it is what it is. I'm not faulting USC or Ohio State or any other blue blood who has a lot of money to give. That's the battleground now. That's the landscape of college football recruiting. Wisconsin needs to at least not outspend the blue bloods, but they have to be competitive in certain battles, is how I put it. And there's a chance that with the collective coming on board, the varsity collective coming on board, that could start happening as well. So I think a lot of reasons why this year is potentially just a one-off that Wisconsin fans have to suffer through. We have to see how Mickey Turner is in that role. We have to see how some of the new coaches are recruiting. But I think next year is going to be better. I think Wisconsin is going to get back on track from a recruiting standpoint. But that doesn't make this class any better, and it doesn't really lessen the sting of losing quite a bit of recruiting momentum from where Wisconsin was with Khalif to where they are now. That's the show. Hope everyone enjoyed it, or at least enjoyed it as best you can. It's never fun to lose a big-time recruit to a blue blood. Excuse me. But if you like the show, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. It really does help support the show. Leave a comment below if you agree or disagree with me. And either way, I'll read it, appreciate it. I try to get those comments worked into the show. We're going to be doing more listener kind of comment shows. So really appreciate all of that. And we're going to talk again tomorrow. Until then, on Wisconsin, and let's keep going.